Thump. Hello gamers. Do you guys have one of these? A Nintendo 64 with a janky thumbstick? Well, today I'm going to go through my Nintendo 64 controllers and replace or repair the thumbsticks for two of them. Man, I loved this controller growing up. It was, I know nowadays we look at it as probably one of the worst controllers ever made, but when I was growing up it was awesome. You know, it was considerate of the multiple different types of gaming. It was inventive, it was unique, and we all wanted to personalize ours. So me and my friends would, you know, wrap hockey stick tape around them on the handles. We would put our names on them with Sharpies. We would color them with Sharpies. We all had our own favorite controller, and it was really cool to just, you know, hop on and GoldenEye, you know, for hours on our own controllers. Of course, they got pretty nasty. The thing about the plastic controller, especially anyone that was, you know, being used on a really intense game, your palms got sweaty. And you were younger, usually, so you didn't really care so much about how dirty your hands were. So all of my controller, all of them were functional, but the thumbsticks were all messed up because, of course, the thumbsticks on the Nintendo 64 are notorious. This animation, I'll provide the link in below on the website, is from where they 3D print replacements, but you can see here how it works. The mechanics of it are not actually analog. It seems like it's analog. The feel of it is supposed to be analog, but realistically, there's just a couple of gears moving through a couple optic sensors, so it's kind of a hybrid. But it felt analog, that's for sure. They make replacement models for it, which you'll see I'm going to put on here later. The replacements that you find are pretty cheap. They're like $10 to $12, and they're modeled after the GameCube controller, where they use actual rheostats to reproduce an analog feel. It's a lot more like what you would see on a modern PlayStation controller, the replacement one, but it's great. I mean, if you're one of those people that really wants the feel of the original thumbstick, which I do sometimes, I'll be honest, then you're going to want to actually just clean or restore the thumbstick that you have, or if it's not restorable because, you know, the plastic is worn down and you know, some piece of it is broken, you can get replacement parts printed, or you can even print them yourself if you have them, and I'll put links in the description below to all of the different resources for good replacement pieces. But if you are one of those people that wants to maintain that feel, then you might just want to clean it. Often cleaning it helps quite a bit. It is a little bit complicated to disassemble, but if you've seen this video, you've probably watched other videos, you probably have a good enough grasp to get it done. It's just really about making sure you put the pieces right back in the correct order and making sure everything's lined up. But even if you do that, you're still going to have a little bit of looseness to the thumbstick if you ever used it, because the plastic wears out just so quickly and so easily that there will be a little bit of looseness. They made a toy for kids, you know, and adults alike. The games were pretty widespread, but that toy was going to take a lot of abuse. Hell, some of the games required that you put your palm on the thumbstick pretty much and just, you know, move it around as fast as you can. And all of the moving components, all the working components of the original N64 thumbstick were made out of plastic, so they wore away. It didn't take long either. You would be playing a game intensely for like a month, and almost always you would, you know, mess up your thumbstick. Most people had a pile in the corner of, you know, semi-working Nintendo 64 controllers. Now that being said, the Nintendo 64 was really weird. If you had the controller, the thumbstick held down in one direction, when the system booted up, it registered the direction it was held down in as the new center for that session. So from that point on, when the thumbstick realigned and went up to the center after you took your thumb off of it, it would start to drift to the right or left, or, you know, the opposite of whatever direction you were holding it down in. So if your controller had some sort of you know, loose disposition and could just rock all the way to the left or right when you booted it up, you were probably setting an alignment issue, as well as reducing the amount of movement you could even make with the controller, with the thumbstick, because if you cannot move with a good enough degree of movement, the thumbstick, then the gears inside will not you know, rotate inside the optical sensor. And so it will not put any movement in. And I'll show you a little bit more when I disassemble it. But here I'm just going to wash this stuff off. I've got a couple of tips for you guys about cleaning these controllers. One of the big ones is I see a lot of people using rubbing alcohol. You really should not. Even if it's really nice, high quality rubbing alcohol, alcohol can damage plastic, and Nintendo used not great plastic back in 1996 when they produced this controller. So if you take rubbing alcohol to get rid of the marker, then you probably will end up with a residue and it'll get kind of nasty. If you've already done that and you don't know what to do, you can use some goo off to remove the residue and kind of put a little bit of a moist layer. It's almost like gun oil on the plastic, and then wash that off with soap and water, and the plastic should be good as new. But if you haven't yet and you're about to, I'm going to show you the technique I use and a lot of people use to get rid of Sharpie marker. It's mind-bogglingly easy. So anyway, the secret to Sharpie removal and any permanent stuff, and a lot of stuff actually, is the magic eraser. I'll have a link to the description below, or a link in the description below, but it really gets it out like almost immediately and doesn't damage the plastic, so it's just perfect for this. If you do have applications where you can use alcohol, you can also use alcohol with the magic eraser, and then it's pretty much amazing what you can remove. So yeah, what you're seeing there on the handle is actually Sharpie. A lot of us were putting tape on our controllers to kind of absorb the sweat from our palms, a little grip tape. But in this case, it had Equus written on it because it was somebody like Latin for horse. And it had Sharpie all over the handles, I guess, to give it a kind of a grip look. I don't remember. I mean, we're talking about 20 years ago. But the hand sweat, wore away at it. So this thumbstick's not. That thumbstick is bad, but this thumbstick is not that bad. Honestly, it aligns pretty well. It feels pretty good. It feels pretty much like a week used, a Nintendo 64 controller that's been used for about a week or so. So I am going to clean it, and here I'll just disassemble it to show you guys what you want to do if you are just trying to restore it and clean it up. So, oh my gosh, yeah, you can see here there's just so much dust in there, and most of it is just, particles of skin from usage of the controller. And it gets in all the parts of it. It gets, covered in all these gears. Now, these little tiny gears, or these little tiny wheels here, are what rotate through the gears that spin them in the optical sensor. And the plastic that it comes into contact with those pieces is what gets worn down. And then you can't apply enough pressure to move it through the sensor. It basically just doesn't work at all. Now, the thumbstick rests, next to these optical sensors, but the thumbstick itself rests in this little reservoir, like a little bowl. Another thing that can happen is that the bottom of the thumbstick will rub up against that little bowl and wear it down, and so there's nothing resisting it. One thing you could do is put a little Vaseline in there, very little, like a tiny little dollop of it. Or if you have grease, that would also work really well, machine grease. But you don't have to put anything in there. You could just leave it as it is, but that is one of the pieces that wears away. Alright, well, I'm going to take these thumbstick pieces and go wash them off camera, and then I'll bring it all back and we'll assemble this stuff. So these are all the pieces, and this is the basic assembly here. When you're taking it apart, that's always the scary part. How do I put it back together? Just want to make sure the optical sensors are in the right place, or the gears that'll come in contact with those sensors. When you're reassembling it, it's pretty self-explanatory for some of the pieces, but some of them, you're like, wait, which way? So you want to put the wide end of the spring down when you're placing the spring in, and when you pin it in, you're going to be pinning it in with the gear that has, or the wheel, I don't know what this thing would be called, but that has the smaller gap in it. And that's it. Once that's on there like this, you know, in alignment where the gear teeth are up on the top, where it's going to go into the gear assembly, you just put in the optic sensors. I cleaned it off with a little toothbrush, place it back in and snap it into place. Put the screws back in and boom, you've done a semi-restoration on your thumbstick. If you find that when you get inside of there is some severe damage to the plastic, some erosion, there are a bunch of solutions, like I said earlier, about 3D printing options or having somebody else print them or just ordering the pieces. There is also a solution you can apply some epoxy to. Odd Tinkerer does a great video on a controller restoration where he does that. So I'll put a link to that in the description below if you'd like to try that method. Now, when I got this controller, it was a 3D printed piece for the adapter, so it did not fit in there. I had to just take a little finger file and saw off some of, or sand off some of this roughness, little protruding plastic pieces. After I did that, it was still snug, but it fit and made contact with the right pins, so no problem. But if you do find that it doesn't fit and something's wrong, it's not the wrong connection. It probably just had a little leftover plastic from the print. Did still take some, oomph to get it in there, but once it was in, it's good. Now this is the replacement. This is the Nintendo GameCube replacement stick. It's just also perfectly matched for this controller. It does feel completely different than the original Nintendo 64 controller, which to me is fine. I like I said earlier, I do have some games that I enjoy playing with that controller just because of the nostalgia's sake, but I really love the replacement thumbstick a lot. If it had come out with this originally, then we would have been pretty happy with it. But this was one of the first ones, one of the first quote-unquote analog thumbsticks to make it to the market. Very shortly after this, Sony released their DualShock analog controller, which I think blew a lot of people away. I think most people, after that came out and the sort of mature nature of PlayStation games in general attracted the audience that had grown up with Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and had maybe even gotten a Nintendo 64 over to PlayStation, which meant a lot of people were using those controllers. They definitely were not as flimsy or as easy to wear down. So over time, the Nintendo 64 controller just got more and more flack buildup to where now it's almost just a meme. You gotta have 3 hands to run the thing. That's not the way the engineers were thinking, though. They were trying to provide a single controller experience for all the types of games that could be produced in a 3D environment. They wanted the extra C buttons so that if people were playing a fighting game, that they would have the more acclaimed controller configuration at the time for fighting games, which was, the Sega controller. Racing games, you got the thumbstick. Platformers, you got, the directional pad. And you could play in 3 different basic configurations with it. So here I'm going to go ahead and play one of my favorite games just to test the controller out. This is BioFreaks. It was my first break into the world of fighting games in 3D, and it was just absolutely so much fun. When I got this game, there was no game out that I had access to anyway that gave the same crazy, unique character experience. Some of them have, swords, some of them have machine guns. It was kind of like, I guess there's a bunch of games like that nowadays, to be honest. But this one, for me at least, was the first. I hadn't played it in something like 15 years, so definitely I'm not going to display any skills here. But the controller worked really well. Now this one is the replacement GameCube controller, and it feels amazing. There's no question that, I'm getting the immediate response out of it. A lot farther range of motion. I'm still trying to figure out what buttons do what. Holy crap. So now I'm going to go ahead and try out the other one, the blue one. Now this one has the original Nintendo 64 thumbstick in it. And I immediately noticed that it just did not feel as good, obviously. It was responsive, no problem. The cleanup did, a good job of getting out whatever was in there that was resisting movement, but it was already kind of functional, so really I didn't do much. But it just felt so different and so much worse when having just come from the Nintendo GameCube controller. Now I'm a retro enthusiast. I absolutely love playing with the OG stuff, but yeah, there's no denying that we have made improvements over the years. Holy crap, this is difficult. I did one uncut playthrough because I was so proud of myself for not getting completely whomped. I mean, I'm playing horribly, but I did actually win. And that always feels good. So there you go. 2 cleaned and restored controllers working with one of my favorite games. If you didn't know, now you know.